My name's Ryan. I'm 36, born and raised in Chicago, and I've been married to Ellie for 6 years. We met in the hallway of a downtown ER. Of all places. She'd accompanied her friend after a car accident. I was fresh into residency, still shaking off the trauma of my first lost patient. She made a joke about the vending machine eating her dollar, and I laughed harder than I had in weeks. That's how it started. Organic. Easy. Ellie was all confidence and calm, a kind of cool intelligence that never needed to raise its voice to be heard. She had this way of talking that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. She worked in media, managing high-profile clients for one of those legacy companies that somehow survived the digital wave. I loved how different our worlds were, her polish to my chaos, her calm to my long nights on call. Somehow it just worked. Or at least, I thought it did. About 3 weeks ago, she mentioned a work retreat in Vermont. It wasn't unusual for her to have corporate getaways. Her company loved these team-building things. But this time, something felt different. She told me over dinner, real casual. By the way, she said, not looking up from her salad, we're going to Vermont next weekend. Company's setting up a little offsite for the client strategy team. I nodded, chewing. Cool. Like a conference thing? More like a mix, brainstorming, relaxation, spa time, that sort of vibe. Sounds nice, I said. Who's going? She shrugged. Just the usual group. Tara, Blake, Jenna. It'll be low-key. I didn't say anything at the time, but I caught how she rattled off the names quickly, as if preemptively answering the question. And then she changed the subject to something forgettable like her dad's new grill or our overdue water bill. And just like that, the conversation shifted. That night, while she was packing, I noticed the red evening dress on the bed. She hadn't worn it in over a year. It was tight in all the right places, bold, elegant, the kind of dress you remember. Next to it were a pair of stilettos, the same ones she wore to my hospital's holiday gala 3 years ago when she left every attending speechless. Vermont, huh? I said, leaning in the doorway with a half-smile. Big pitch night at the spa? She barely looked up. Don't be dramatic. Just saying, I joked. You pack lighter for weddings. She gave me a tight smile. Not playful. Not flirty. Just dismissive. Like I was an interruption. I noticed the black silk pouch, too. I knew it like I knew my own stethoscope. It held her best lingerie. Stuff she'd only pull out for special occasions. Our anniversaries. Getaways. Nights when she wanted to make a memory. That pouch hadn't seen daylight in a year. And now it was in her suitcase for a team-building retreat? I didn't push it. I'm not that guy. I trusted her. Or maybe I wanted to trust her badly enough to ignore the alarm bells. Friday morning came. She was up early, dressed sharp blazer, fitted pants, a silk blouse I hadn't seen before. She looked stunning. Hair perfect. Makeup just right. She had that glow, the one you get when you're excited about something. She didn't kiss me goodbye like she usually did. No lingering hug, no last-second smile. Just a quick peck on the cheek and a mumbled, love you. Then she was gone. And the silence left behind felt loud. I worked the weekend shift at the hospital. Friday was a blur, trauma call, a couple of motor accidents, a ruptured appendix, and a night that bled into Saturday morning without sleep. But even in the middle of a high-stakes surgery, my mind kept drifting. Where was she right now? Who was she talking to? Was she laughing like she used to with me? Saturday evening, I texted her. Me, how's Vermont? Everything good? 10 minutes passed. Ellie, all good. Just a dinner. Wi-Fi's trash. Miss you. It was cold. Usually she'd send a selfie. Or a wish you were here with a pic of the view. But this? It read like a formality. Something typed quickly between sips of wine and glances across the table. I stared at my phone for a few minutes, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I tossed it back on the counter. Sunday came. I was off that night, so I picked up groceries and did the laundry. She texted again around 3 p.m. Ellie, flight's delayed. Might be home closer to midnight. Don't wait up, yellow heart. Again, formal. The kind of message you'd send your landlord, not your husband. I stayed up anyway, not out of suspicion, but because I couldn't sleep. Not with everything in my chest feeling wrong. She came in around 12:40 a.m. I was sitting on the couch, reading, pretending not to be waiting. She was quiet, didn't turn on any lights. She slipped off her heels like she was trying not to be heard. I greeted her softly. Hey. She looked up, startled. Oh, you're still up? I nodded. Couldn't sleep. She smiled, small, tired, closed-lipped. Flight was brutal. I'm dead. She didn't mention Vermont. No stories. No drama about her coworkers. Just a yawn and I'm going to shower. I watched her walk down the hallway. Her shoulders were tense. Her voice, flat. And I knew right then, something was different. The version of her that left on Friday wasn't the same one who came back. And I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but it scared the hell out of me. The Monday after she got back, Ellie moved through the house like a ghost. She went to work the next morning like nothing had happened, kissed me on the cheek again the way you'd greet a colleague. Not even eye contact. No, how was your weekend? No comment on the lasagna I'd left her in the fridge. Just a soft, see you tonight, and the front door clicking shut. I stood there for a while, holding my coffee, listening to the silence creep back in. That silence, I've come to realize, is louder than any argument. For a while, I convinced myself I was imagining things. Maybe the trip really had just worn her out. I knew what burnout looked like. I lived it every day. 14-hour shifts, patients who didn't make it, residents on the verge of collapse, families breaking down in waiting rooms. I knew emotional fatigue when I saw it. But this wasn't that. This was something else. Over the next few days, she stopped asking about my day. Not in the passive, distracted way most couples fall into after years together. This was intentional. Her eyes didn't flick up from her phone when I walked in. She didn't laugh at the TV shows we used to binge. We stopped eating at the same time. She started claiming she wasn't hungry or already ate at work. She'd always been affectionate, playfully running her fingers along my neck while we cooked, throwing her legs over mine while we watched TV, curling into me like a cat when we went to bed. That week, she slept facing the wall. And every night, her phone stayed face down on silent. Always nearby. Always in reach. One night, I climbed into bed after a long shift, trying not to wake her. I slipped my arm around her waist just out of habit, just trying to feel close. She flinched. Not a dramatic recoil, just a quiet tensing of the body. She gently pushed my hand away and muttered, "Not now." It wasn't rejection that hurt. It was the flatness in her voice. There was no sadness in it. No hesitation. It was just detached. I stared at the ceiling for a long time that night. A few days later, she was late getting home. I waited until 9 o'clock, then texted. "Me, everything okay? Want me to heat something up for you? Ellie, hanging with the team after work. Just decompressing. Don't wait up." She didn't get back until after midnight. No explanation. No stories. No perfume. Just a woman who slipped off her shoes, went to the bathroom, brushed her teeth, and climbed into bed like she was alone in it. I asked her the next morning how her night was. "Fine," she said. Then changed the subject. That word "fine" started popping up everywhere. Dinner was fine. My day was fine. The meeting was fine. Our marriage was shrinking into that one word. By the end of the week, even her body language changed. She folded in on herself. She crossed her arms during conversations. Her smiles, when they came, were the kind you wear in a meeting, not the kind you give to the person who's seen you at your worst. I'd never noticed how easily she avoided my eyes until she stopped doing it altogether. There was always a screen, a cup, a mirror, something to fix her attention on that wasn't me. She started drinking more too. A glass of wine while she cooked, then another after dinner. Then one turned into 2 before dinner, or 3 after work. Bottles started disappearing faster than usual, and I caught her once pouring one before 5. I wasn't judging. God knows I've seen enough people cope in worse ways. But this wasn't just stress. This was escape. And the thing she was escaping from was our life. One Thursday night, we sat on the couch together for the first time all week. I asked if she wanted to watch that British show we used to love. She said sure, but scrolled through her phone the entire time. Halfway through, I paused the episode and said, gently, "Ellie, what's going on with us?" She looked up slow. Her eyes were glassy but not teary. Not sad. Just empty. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You've been distant. Since Vermont." She raised her eyebrows. "I'm just tired, Ryan." "Tired?" I asked. "Of what?" She stared at me for a long moment, then said, "I don't know. Just everything." I didn't push. I couldn't. I was scared that if I pressed too hard, she'd say the one thing I wasn't ready to hear. So I nodded. Told her to get some rest. She went upstairs and left her wine glass on the table, still half full. And I just sat there staring at it, wondering how something so full could feel so hollow. I'm not proud of what I did next. But when your reality starts to crumble, you start reaching for anything solid. Even if it means digging where you swore you wouldn't. The following Monday, Ellie left early again. She said she had a presentation to prep for. She barely finished her toast, kissed me on the cheek like a stranger, and disappeared out the door with her laptop bag and that unreadable expression she'd worn like armor for the last 2 weeks. That morning, I sat in the kitchen staring at the same cup of coffee until it went cold. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. The missed dinners, The phone always silent and screen down. The lies I didn't want to call lies yet. And Vermont. That retreat. She never showed me photos. Never told a single story. Not even a passing comment about coworkers or the hotel or some weird Uber ride. Which, for Ellie, was unheard of. She used to recount every detail of her trips. From the design of the minibar to the shoes her boss wore. But this time, nothing. Just a blank space in her memory. A chapter sealed shut. So I did something I hadn't done since we got married. I lied. I called her office that afternoon under the pretense of gratitude. I figured if I kept it casual, no red flags would go up. Just a simple, polite thank you to her manager for organizing what sounded like a very thoughtful and luxurious corporate retreat. A woman named Brenda answered. She was polite, even a little chipper. I said, "Hi, I'm Ryan Parker. My wife Ellie works in client relations. She told me you all had a retreat in Vermont a couple weekends ago. Just wanted to say thanks." Sounded like a great event. There was a pause. Brenda cleared her throat and said, "I'm sorry. A retreat?" I froze. "Yeah, she said your team did a weekend offsite? Spa and planning sessions." Another pause. Then a quiet but clear voice. "There was no company retreat that weekend, Mr. Parker. A few employees took personal days around then, but nothing was organized by the company." My mouth went dry. "Right?" I said, forcing a short laugh. "Sorry, must have misunderstood. Thanks anyway." I hung up. Just like that. She wasn't in Vermont for work. She took personal time. And she never told me. I didn't throw my phone across the room. I didn't scream or punch a wall. I just sat there, the silence louder than ever. And I felt something inside me shift. Not anger. Not even heartbreak. Clarity. She lied to me. Could have been anything, anyone, any reason. But the truth was simple. She wasn't with her team. She wasn't where she said she'd be. And she didn't want me to know. That night, she came home a little late again. Said she stopped by a coworker's birthday thing. I nodded. Didn't mention the call. Instead, I listened. I watched. I paid attention in a way I hadn't before. And that's when the smallest details started screaming. She laughed at her phone, but turned the screen away when I walked into the room. She started putting a passcode on her laptop when she never used to. She took her calls in the guest bathroom, fan on. It was like watching a play from behind the curtain. You know the actors are pretending, but you can't tell if they even remember you're there. 2 days later, a strange email landed in my inbox. It came from her company's domain, addressed to me by name. That wasn't too odd. I'd submitted insurance paperwork for her benefits through this address before. But this was different. The subject line read, "Regarding your submitted concerns, internal review complete." Confused, I opened it. Inside was a message thanking me for providing information regarding potential misuse of company resources. I hadn't submitted anything, but clearly, someone had assumed I had. Attached to the email was a PDF report. My hands started to shake as I clicked it open. It was a scanned summary of flagged charges to a corporate card. Hotel bookings, spa treatments, dinner reservations. One entry was bolded. Reservation for Eleanor Parker plus guest. Location, White Pines Resort and Spa, Burlington, Vermont. Dates, Friday through Sunday. Room type, luxury suite, king bed. Additional guest, Blake Morrison. I read it again. Blake Morrison, her coworker. The same Blake she once said was too arrogant to date anyone. The one who wore cologne like body spray and always made her roll her eyes in meetings. That Blake. I stared at the screen for a long time, numb. Then I printed the email, stapled the report, set it on the kitchen table. That night, when she walked through the door, I didn't stand up. She hung her coat, looked over, and smiled brief, automatic. Then she saw the paper on the table. She walked over slowly. Read the top of the page. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. First, her eyes scanned the print. Then they met mine. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stood there, blinking, like she'd been caught in the flash of a camera she didn't know was there. I kept my voice level. "Did you spend the weekend with Blake?" She sat down on the edge of the dining chair. Still holding the page? Still silent. I said I didn't file a complaint. I just asked where you were. She lowered the paper and covered her face with both hands. And for the first time since she got back, I didn't feel like I was losing my mind. I didn't feel paranoid or controlling or dramatic. I felt real. I felt awake. She didn't apologize. Didn't explain. Didn't deny. She got up a few minutes later and walked out of the room. The door to the guest room slammed shut behind her. We haven't spoken more than a few words since. She still sleeps in our bed. I stay on the couch. I don't ask where she's going. She doesn't ask what I'm thinking. But she knows. And now I do too. There's a strange kind of grief that comes from being in the same room as someone you used to love, still technically married, still breathing the same air, but feeling like you're already gone. That's what our house turned into, a space where two people lived, but only shadows moved. After I laid the printout on the table and asked her about Blake, things didn't explode like I imagined they would. No shouting. No crying. No dramatic confession. She just sat there. Stared at the page like she didn't recognize her own name. And then she left the room like it was nothing more than a quiet Wednesday night and the truth hadn't just been dropped like a bomb on the dining table. The next morning, I woke up early, habit from the hospital, and found her in the kitchen. She didn't look up. Just poured coffee into her favorite mug, the one with the cracked handle and the words "trust the timing" on the side. I didn't say anything. She didn't either. We moved around each other like strangers in an airport, aware but untouching. It wasn't just awkward. It was eerie. Like we were walking through the crime scene of our own relationship, careful not to step on the evidence. Later that afternoon, I got another email. This one I hadn't expected. It was from someone in her company's HR department. Apparently, since the original email landed in my inbox, they said due to my prior inclusion in their benefits system, they figured I'd want to know the case had been closed. There was a line that stood out even now. Appropriate disciplinary measures have been taken internally. They didn't say what. Just that the situation was being handled and thanked me again for my cooperation. I printed that too. Left it next to the first page. That evening, she came home later than usual. Still no explanation. Still no emotion. She saw the new sheet and paused, I scanning the line about disciplinary measures. Her hands curled slightly on the edge of the table. Still, she said nothing. Instead, she walked into the bathroom, turned on the shower, and let the water run for 20 minutes before I even heard her step inside. The next few days were like that. No fights. No accusations. No in asterisk Macy. Just a slow unraveling. I started noticing how little we touched physically or emotionally. She stopped doing my laundry. I stopped making coffee for both of us in the morning. We started buying groceries separately, marking things off on separate lists like roommates negotiating a shared fridge. The wine bottles multiplied on the counter. The empty ones ended up in the recycling bin outside, quietly stacked next to each other, like gravestones of a ritual she couldn't give up. It became part of her nightly routine. She didn't even pretend it was about unwinding anymore. Just poured, sipped, scrolled her phone, then disappeared to bed. She didn't look guilty. Just defeated. Sometimes I'd hear her crying in the shower. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just this low, broken sound like someone had been hollowed out and was trying to remember how to be full again. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. Because every time I looked at her, I saw the Vermont suite. The reservation. The second guest's name. Blake. And not once did she say it out loud. That was the part that messed with me the most, not just that she cheated, but that she wouldn't even admit it. Like if she never said the words, maybe it would stay in the past. Like silence was a band-aid she could stretch over an open wound and expect it to hold. But it didn't hold. It just festered. One night, I came home late from the hospital. She was already in bed, asleep or pretending to be. I walked past the bedroom door and for the first time I didn't hesitate. I went straight to the guest room. I stared at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't thinking about Blake. Not really. I wasn't even imagining what they did. I was thinking about the way she used to laugh at my terrible jokes. How she used to sit on the kitchen counter while I cooked, dipping her finger in the sauce. How she used to call me her person. Now we barely made eye contact. That weekend I pulled the boxes out of the attic. Not for her stuff. For mine. Books. Clothes. Scrubs. A few framed photos that still meant something to me. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't ask where I'd go. I just started organizing my life like someone who knew this chapter was ending and didn't want to read the last page. Sunday afternoon. She walked in while I was folding a sweater into one of the boxes. She didn't ask what I was doing. She just stood there in the doorway, holding a glass of wine in one hand, the stem twisted between her fingers. "I didn't mean for it to get this far," she said quietly. I didn't respond. She took a small sip, looked around the room like it belonged to someone else. "I thought I could fix it. I didn't know how to come back from it." Still, I said nothing. After a moment, she nodded slowly, like she'd expected this. And then she left the room. That was the last real conversation we had for weeks. And in some ways, it said more than any fight ever could. It's strange how people imagine the end of a marriage. They picture shouting, glass shattering, someone storming out with a suitcase while the other begs them to stay. But most of the time, it ends in silence. It ends in the slow decay of things that once mattered, until one day, you realize the person sitting across the room from you is a stranger wearing your memories. That's where Ellie and I were. We lived in the same house, but it didn't feel like ours anymore. It felt like a museum of what used to be. A kitchen with 2 coffee mugs, a living room with our wedding photo still on the shelf, a bathroom with matching towels we hadn't replaced in years. Familiar, but empty. Routine, but distant. She spent most evenings in the living room, curled up on the couch with her laptop and a glass, or 2 of wine. I kept to my study, catching up on patient charts or scrolling through old vacation photos when I couldn't sleep. We barely acknowledged each other. We didn't fight. We didn't flirt. We just existed. Until one night, everything cracked. It was a Thursday. I remember because it had been a long shift, the kind of day where you lose a patient on the table and then still have to smile politely when the next one walks in. I came home emotionally wiped, just looking for quiet. Ellie was already 2 glasses deep. The half-empty bottle sat on the coffee table like a centerpiece. She wore her usual post-work uniform, pajama pants, one of my old t-shirts, and a look that was hard to read. Somewhere between detached and broken. She turned toward me as I passed through the living room. Her eyes were glassy, but focused. Not drunk exactly, just tired, emotionally wasted. "You ruined my career," she said, her voice low but clear. I stopped walking. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't get up. She just said it like a fact, like something she'd been rehearsing in her head all day. I turned to face her slowly. "I didn't lie about a retreat," I said. "You did." She scoffed, bitter. "You didn't have to tell them. You didn't have to let them investigate." "I didn't tell them anything," I said. "They asked me to verify something. I told the truth. The rest? That was on them. On you." She stood then, almost stumbling as she set the wine glass down. Her expression cracked, part anger, part desperation. "You just stood there and watched me fall." I could have said a lot in that moment. That I stood by her for 6 years. That I trusted her until trust was no longer an option. That I gave her every opportunity to come clean. But I didn't. I just said, "You fell before I even knew you were slipping." Her breath hitched, just barely. Then she shook her head and walked out. I heard her sob once, quiet, like a choked gasp, before the door to the guest room clicked shut behind her. The next morning, I found her asleep on the couch. She hadn't even made it to bed. The wine bottle was empty, the glass still on the table, a film of red at the bottom. Her phone was clutched in her hand, screen dark. She didn't stir when I stepped into the room. I didn't wake her. I didn't cover her with a blanket. I just stared at her for a moment, at the woman I used to think I knew, and felt nothing. Not anger, not sympathy, just absence. I walked into the kitchen to make coffee. As I reached for the fridge, I saw a note taped to the door. Just a torn scrap of notebook paper, written in her handwriting. 3 words. "You win. Congrats." It didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel like anything. I read it twice, then crumpled it and tossed it in the trash. That day, I didn't go to work. I called in a personal day, something I rarely do. I sat in the living room after she finally got up and went upstairs, and I just let the quiet settle around me. The sunlight poured through the windows like it always did. The neighbor's dog barked. The mail came. Everything looked the same. But the air felt different, like something had finally died. Later that afternoon, I started packing again. Slowly. Deliberately. Not out of rage, not out of spite. Just because it was time. I stopped trying to figure out if she'd say sorry. I stopped waiting for her to explain. The truth was simple now. It had been for weeks. And when the trust goes, love doesn't scream. It just leaves. Ellie and I became strangers who shared square footage. No fights. No closeness. Just cold routines, her whine, my silence, the mutual agreement to avoid eye contact. Laundry left unfolded, dinners eaten separately. The bathroom counter stayed cluttered with her makeup, but her presence faded like a scent in the air. We didn't argue because there was nothing left to fight for. I stopped checking her phone. I stopped wondering if she was still seeing Blake. Honestly, I didn't care. You can't betray someone who's no longer there. I started packing for real. Studio listings, donation boxes, goodbye notes left unsaid. We were done. Not with a bang, but with the door closing quietly behind everything we once were.